Hi, Chelsea. We are talking about our writing practice and how it's been the last week. Subarna was talking about some resistance, and I haven't written as much. And Monica, you were saying?
That this week I really am not struggling, but challenging myself to see it as less of a therapy session because I'm finding that kind of tedious, coming to the page every day and dissecting my thoughts and feelings. I mean, I know there's value to that, but at the same time, I do have actual goals. I'm loose goals in my writing. I want to develop other muscles. I don't just want this to be the ranting and ravings of me. I get bored of me, actually. I want to see what else is in there, So I'm struggling a bit with that. And so I've really focused on sort of giving myself, maybe 15 minutes to get all that junk out. And then, okay, let's close our eyes. Let's just connect to whatever's out there and just let it flow and be less about, the trials and tribulations of every day and maybe something bigger. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
But you also said, I wonder when that attention changed, you also said you started getting some new ideas for creative short stories. So that's actually new kinds of writing is starting to come through.
Yeah.
And at the same point that you're kind of like, not tired, but somewhat over the therapeutic self-writing.
Yeah, trying to make space for that instead of, yeah.
Monica, I have something to add there because I feel like I was tending to do that as well when it was more like trying to first air out the dirty laundry and then try to make sense of it and then just try to comfort the child and everything. But and then I'm like, why am I just almost whining about my life so much? That sort of vibe of, oh, what is this pity? Why am I searching for pity for myself? And but then I felt like the more I resisted it, the more angry I got. So it's just easier. How I thought of it is, okay, if the morning pages are a place of no judgment, let it just be that. Let whatever wants to flow, if it wants to be therapy for the entire 3 pages, that's fine. I need to allow for space for that to live. And then I just pick up another notebook and then just shifts me logically. Okay, this space was for rant. Now the rant's over. Now let's just write about something random or write poetry or just that distinction of space, that this is my therapeutic space in terms of writing on this notebook versus say a different kind of paper, a different kind of vibe. It's a little thing, but I feel like it did help with that space of changing that vibe there. And then I started using sticky notes, and I think they're awesome because they have that limited field space, surface area. So you're forced to encapsulate whatever you're thinking within that, especially with ideas and quotes and things like that. And I just put them all around my room, inside my cupboard, wherever. So instinctually, I'm reminded of things that have prompted me rather than they just living somewhere in my morning pages and never actually getting the time and space they deserve to. I'm also trying to do the thing where I don't read it as they recommend as well. So it's 8 weeks, and I think it does have some value to it to distance yourself from whatever therapy you're doing in your session and just leaving it there and taking along with you whatever wants to come along to the day.
I like that idea of having different tools, like shifting from one kind of notebook to another or whatever, because that's almost like you're signaling the shift of energies. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's actually a good tip that I should try, because I do find I'm right now doing the pages and then also the kind of journaling prompts or just the planning, the Odyssey planning stuff in the same space. And I also find that when I look, I don't know if you guys experience this, but when I journal and then I'm spending more time reading back. I don't know if you are, but it takes me a while to kind of read back and then and then kind of distill what I wrote a little bit. And I know you're not supposed to read back, but I do find, yeah, it's like a fine balance. Like, how much do I look back? How much time do I spend looking back versus writing more?
The interesting thing is,
sorry.
I'll just be quick. The interesting thing is I did accidentally read back, because I don't, but the temptation is there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I accidentally read back to the very first paragraph I wrote on day one of our class, the very first free writing we did, and I cannot believe how much I've changed already. Like, I thought the changes would be imperceptible, but it's amazing how profound the writing has been.
I see you, Louis, in terms of like being like not obsessed, but like letting things assimilate in terms of what's trying to get digested. But yeah, I actually do the journaling prompts online, like typing, because that's another logical shift because I feel like when you're designing something, you want to be able to edit. And while there's space for free writing, there also may be space for like mindful editing in terms of, okay, maybe this is not what I actually think, and just clarifying in terms of like design compass and all those things, that taking something online and something offline can also help with the logical segregation. But yeah, the urge is very real, like to see how far you've come. But yeah.
So there's a couple things I really want to point out. The whole big goal, one, I'm really stoked to hear that you notice all that transformation, Monica, and that idea of really just seeing that transformation and is powerful. I think it's really significant at this point of the class to really start looking at all the different ways to show up to the page, and even the different kinds of pages we can show up to. So you've identified like the therapeutic writing session, where it's like gushing, or also exploring the way we are from like well, why don't you tell me about it, Sean? Then I tell you about it. I would say there's that. Then there's like the whiny Sean, like just letting my whiny, getting out all the shit, right? Then there's like the designing your life writing on prompts, where it's like, okay, this is like, we're going to do this thing that we can work with. Then there's like the creative free writing, where it's like, you just make up a character, and then all of a sudden in your writing, you write something, you're like, oh my God, puppets. Wow, and then now you're writing this thing on puppets, right? Or something like that, right? So there's like the free flow creative writing, right? So we have, that's what, 5 different kinds for therapy, whiny, designy, creative free writing, just like real play. I honestly think rereading your notes is another one. I would call that another writing activity, especially if you're using the notes to be like, oh my God, I can't believe how far I've come. Are you just saying that? Or are you in another notebook going, oh my God, I can't believe how far I've come. And now I've got this notebook that I'm reading over here, and then this notebook I'm reading over here, and are writing over here. So then it becomes like a note taking. So I'm reading this, I'm like, wow, I am so whiny. And also, or whatever it is. What's interesting, so that these are also different types of attention and engagement that we're bringing to the page. So one of the promises of this course is to give you the opportunity to experiment with all of these different ways of writing, which is why I geeked out about the power of writing. Like, that's not one thing. Like, we just talked about self-therapy, venting, that nobody really wants to hear, let's be honest, not even us. We don't want to reread that, but it's still like helpful to get it out, right? Designing, planning, prototyping, where we're erasing, scratching out, drawing diagrams, and then reading and note taking. And then also just free creative writing.
And also reading the books.
Yes. So in that note, I just want to also like some other things that I've played with that I really like. I started using note cards, 3x5 note cards. I just get a stack of them, partially because they fit really well with my pages. So now I have this in my pocket. I have like a little traveling companion. And that when I get something that I want to develop creatively, I will, so seeing, learning differently on seeing, I might be like, ooh, that's a neat blog post. Now I'm doing professional work. I'm writing web copy in my pages, and I feel good when I'm getting a draft of the newsletter down. This is awesome, even if I don't use it. So it's kind of like professional writing. Point being, I've noticed, and Julia Cameron and Natalie Goldberg make this point in different ways. Your objects, actually, in Evans and Burnett, the objects that you use, pencil, loose note cards, on the lined section, like a recipe. I got inspired once to think about like recipes for the good life. It's like 1 walk times 30 minutes of writing, whatever. And I thought of that when I looked at this lined note card versus the blank this way. I've noticed writing a blank note card this way does something different than writing a lined note card this way. What the fuck? I also noticed, this is really kind of messy and embarrassing, but it's a fun experiment. I got this giant like pad of paper that I've been taking notes on. So I have like on my desk, it's like this, it's a 2 feet by 1.5 foot giant piece of paper with all of these notes that I can like, this is on this room on the marketing club, which actually connected to this other piece here. And like having this much room to just sprawl out has been interesting. So point being, I think, the goal of this course is to give us some experience in harnessing some of the things that work for us. And for you, Monica, in terms of your, what I wish I would have done it earlier on when I started my pages 5 years ago, is to do that like kind of synchronicity training when something is like, stands out to me as being like, ooh, I'm onto something, to put it on on one of these, just the title on the top of it, and put it somewhere else. Because now I don't need to read my shit.
Yeah.
Because when I go back to this is 169 of these read books for me. So I'm going into I go into episode 40 of these, and there's some really cool ideas buried in a whole lot of shit. Right? And I needed to write that shit.
So I thought about that, and it became a concern early on, because I'm a typer, right? And all I have is this long running document. So whenever a different form of writing pops up, so when a story idea pops into my head, I type in capital letters story ideas.
Love it.
Story idea. So at least it's searchable.
Yeah.
Right. So if I can search through my however many pages long document it is, at least I'll find it again. But that's a really good tip. I got to do that.
You can even use Notion. Notion is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I like using Notion for typing and recording things onto things through all your devices into, because you can do that. You can quickly just you can make a sentence into a page of its own, or just like a word in your free writing can become its own portal into another thing. And
it's called Motion?
Notion.
Notion. Okay.
Notion.
Do you use Notion too, Louis?
Yeah.
Do you use Evernote too, or
no? I don't use Evernote. I use Notion.
Okay.
And I also thought about Subarna. I also thought about putting this in Notion, but still there's the writing physical aspect of it that is a bit different for me, that I enjoy. But I wish there was something like that, that you can Notion, just kind of categorize with the physical aspect it kind of together. That would be the ideal situation, because I do find I have different notebooks going, and then also in order for me to get to the nuggets, I have to reread a lot of crap, and that's very time consuming, energy consuming. So
bullet journaling talks about
Yes.
using different ways of
Yeah.
with
Oh.
free handwriting. I tried it. I bought the actual bullet journal, and it just didn't. I just couldn't be.
Mm.
I couldn't be structured or committed enough. I don't know. And then I
think
left it all over the hospital. So that was,
it's so hard for me to fit any of those other programs for note taking. That's why I like Natalie Goldberg's, where it's just like her doing her thing, and there's no space for me to write in the pages at all. Like I couldn't do the bullet journaling either. Or Tim Ferriss has a 5-minute journal thing. It's really nice. I couldn't do it. I love the idea. It still didn't work.
I think for me, it's like if I need the free writing, because you can't do all the therapy and the whiny and all that aspect of things in the bullet journaling and the 5-minute journal. But I feel like that can be good, like add-ons. So like, cherries on your respective cakes every day, in terms of, okay, I've done my free writing today. What if I try like 5 minutes of bullet journaling to see the essence of what I've written, or what I want to take forth or remember. So like 5 bullet points at the end as almost like summary takeaways. That's another interesting thing. But Monica, I highly recommend Notion, especially in terms of just organizing data and structuring data. You can even like do it in a calendar. So you can have the calendar, and then you can write different blocks, and it's really cool. I highly recommend.
I'm already downloading it right now.
Awesome.
Yes. I'll try to focus on the class though.
It's all right. Yeah, you can install. No, I think this is really important, because I do think we're at a point where we're starting to actually be on the back end of the course, where we're thinking about what in this course are we going to continue to use. And I personally really like the idea of optimizing my process in a way that like just little tiny things, like when I found I could put a box around a new topic in my pages, that was in like page, whatever, where now I have like these visual cues for myself that I have like, oh, and I'm also using that to pay more attention, where it's like, I'll do 2 lines that are like, like this, just like a break. I've been using these more, where it's like no longer a therapy session. So then it's like a paragraph break, but it's visually, I could be like, oh, yeah. And then I can see in some of my other, I've gotten better at headings of different things. So like this is a heading from a page that I liked, and I can see that this is. And sometimes I play with different colors of pen, where it's like, oh, I'm in a different space, taking different notes. I'm gonna not use my black ballpoint. I'm gonna use this other thing. I don't know. Again, this is like my analog way of making this searchable, but I do think when you're starting to try to make these valuable, you're like, oh, I'm like becoming a writer in these pages. And by writer, I mean, I'm going to publish and sell this. That introduces like another layer of like, whoa, that makes it harder. So I do think the other thing I've noticed, when I do rereading of my pages as part of a writing exercise, or as like for fun, it's that I'm not like going there like, I'm going to use, what can I use from here? It's more like, I wonder what this is. Or I just pick one. So for yours, Monica, you might just like scroll to the document randomly and just like go to some place and then be like, oh, what's this? So you can kind of like do the synchronicity thing with your own work. I feel like that's a healthier way to keep like a free form, like, because you just don't, I know for me, I don't want to do anything that compromises my like love of this thing, because it's too precious to exploit that. And Cameron does talk about that. People that have the hardest time with getting a lot out of their morning pages is writers who want to use it to sell, really. And yet you can tell by Julia Cameron's writing and Natalie Goldberg's writing that their best writing comes out of the morning pages. You just enter into this flow and it's like, ooh, yeah. Ooh, I just wrote a draft of a story. So that's good. That's good.
It's like what you just said, all the different types of writing and attention engagement, all the things you listed, right? It's like you can write all day long, basically. right? Like,
Yeah. If you're lucky enough, yeah.
yeah, just
Especially if you're
very,
taking notes, for sure.
yeah, taking notes and also just the kind of optimizing your system so that it works for you is in itself like very, yeah, it's a process. Because sometimes that changes too.
Yes.
But I think it's really important in terms of the alternative would be to just stop because it stops being as fun. So I feel like
Yeah.
the variation is important to keep things like playful and light. And it's like you can't play the same game every single day, you'll get bored of it. But like micro changes in different aspects can keep the key exploration going. And maybe those are the shifts that we also need to like make transitional shifts in our psyche and in our writing with these different spaces and objects. Another thing I realized, my friend told me about in terms of, I always have my yoga mat open in the thought that, okay, if I see it open, maybe I'm going to go, do a quick flow between meetings. But that doesn't happen. And I realized it after like months of doing it, that the intentional like rolling up of the yoga mat is just as important as like rolling out, in terms of if I see it rolled up, then it's an action on itself to pick it up and roll it out. And therefore that signals the entire cycle, okay, now it's time for you to exercise or do your stretches. And then so when the trigger is actually therefore not the rolling out, but the rolling back up and putting away. And I feel like maybe that there is an analogy there for other things, especially when you said that you can write all day long. I'm sure that you can do that and it'll be fun. But I guess there will be an exhaustion point where you need to like shift away in order to get some perspective and then like see it from other sources. And I think that's especially interesting with like creative writing and that entire flow. Because otherwise you can just go on and on and on and on and you don't know, like it may not you may just be going in circles. And while that's fine, but it can be a little exhausting and frustrating when it's not I'm gonna shut the cycle out. But I guess the intentional rolling back up that did have some value in my observation.
So I think we're at a good point to actually start looking at to kind of do the free writing that I really want to do today. I've been like waiting to do. But I think playing with different triggers I'm calling them triggers of rolling out the yoga mat and rolling it back up as part of the environment, and the different kinds of practices is really, really significant of these different ways. I love the idea of more playful in our brain, little micro adjustments that we can keep it fresh as we move through. So it's not the same thing. We can continue to kind of work in that. Anything else before we shift to the free writing? The only other thing that I felt like saying is that I think there's a lot of power in being clear on, what do I need in the pages this morning? If it's like part venting, part whining, part therapy. I love that you said, Monica, you like leave room for that, but you're also like, you know what? I need to actually just have some fun here. So that's what I'm going to do. And I do think you can adjust that as it goes. Okay. The theme for the next 2 weeks, we're on this idea of connection. The more I do this course, the more I feel like connection is everything in a lot of ways. So the first big prompt is, what does connection mean for you? When I say connection, what comes up? Second prompt, if you want to go there. Who are your big heroes? Who do you want to be like? It's the same question. Third question, we did this last time actually, so maybe we don't need to do this, but what's the best version of yourself? So if you imagine the highest and best version of yourself, what does that look like? So that's all I'm going to say for now, and let's do 15 minutes on connection. What is connection? And then who are your heroes? You can either pick one hero and just describe why they're your hero, or generate like a list of heroes. Interestingly, for this exercise, they don't need to be alive. It can be someone from history. They also don't need to be real. So you could say, why am I thinking of The Last Airbender? It's one of my heroes. Totally legit. This exercise will still work. Okay, what is connection? Who are your heroes? When I say connection, what do you think of? Okay, that was 20 minutes. So yeah. How was that?
That was hard for me.
So big or why? Which part? The connection part or the heroes part?
Both.
Do you want to say what? Do you know what?
I don't know.
It's a good place to be. I'm wondering, do we want to interrogate it more or do you want to pass? Because I'm curious. Well, I'm curious why. Why? But I also don't want to. I don't want to interrogate it if it doesn't want to be interrogated.
I think the heroes one, I have a hard time. I've always had a hard time picking a hero or like somebody I want to be in a way,
Yeah.
because I feel like I just want to be myself. And I can't be anyone else, even if I wanted to.
It's powerful.
Yeah. And then with the connections one, I was having a hard time just. It feels very abstract to me. And then when I try to get deeper into it, I found some shadows where like, oh, like connection to me also means suffocation and responsibility and feeling trapped. But that comes from like a lot of my childhood, I guess, which is like other deeper things. Yeah. Is that a good interrogation?
Super good.
I guess I did know why.
Do you feel, I mean, this comes up, what makes me think of that we're connected with different parts of our past? We agree? Or we're connected with the past? Are we connected with different versions of ourselves that we were in the past? Is there a version of yourself that you like the most? This is a weird question, but is there a version of yourself that you're like, man, for me is like 6-year-old Sean. 6-year-old Sean was the shit. He wasn't all caught up in all the other things that midlife Sean is caught up in. He also had people cleaning up and feeding him. So I guess that's maybe understandable if we're going to be gentle on midlife Sean. But I mean, you hit on, I mean, I'm really glad that you shared that because you hit on the importance of us being connected to our past and the problems that that is and how honestly like freedom. So I wonder if there's a way to be connected that's also liberating. Because it's interesting to me, I wrote about like how connection is everything and thinking about like Buddhist metaphysics and interdependent arising and how we're all connected, like how we're just interdependent, dynamic beings. And we're more connected than we would normally think. And how being aware of all those different connections gives us more freedom in a sense, while it also gives us way more responsibility to everything. Kind of what I was writing about. So I mean, I wonder, is there a way, and maybe this just isn't, maybe this whole topic just doesn't work for Lu Yi. Maybe connection is like a dead end for you, which is like it reframes like all of these are just ideas that might work really well for other people and not for others. So maybe this isn't like the way. Maybe the way is to ask, I mean, what's the opposite of not disconnection, but independence and freedom? So maybe you want to explore that. Maybe this is the wrong way into this dichotomy for you.
Maybe. I mean, immediately I feel more energy in those two words.
See?
Or maybe it's just like the type of day I'm having.
Yeah, you're like, don't talk to me about connection. Fuck you, this is between me and me. Which I'm like, well, isn't that a connection? Like you are connected to your past.
Yeah, whether you want to be or not.
Right. Well, this is, maybe we're not. Maybe it is. Maybe we are more independent than we give ourselves credit for. Maybe we have more free. I mean, that's what the existentialists are saying. That if we knew how free we were, it would freak us out.
Mm.
The first word that came to my mind was commitment, like of time and attention and all sorts of mind space. And while commitment can feel like good at times, but it's also really scary, because similar things about what you said, Louis, about like you don't know if the space is enabling you or if it is like consuming you, and you'll never know till you're out of that space of what it's doing for you. And thank you for your share, because it did validate that experience. And the analogy I came up with was like, what if you were to look at, so I was thinking of it in like the physical sense of what two spaces, what does it mean to connect them? And I thought about like, what if we're all like our own celestial bodies, but we can't exist in a vacuum? Like there has to be other gravitational forces, whether we like it or not, that like hold us and shape where we are going. But we still have our own properties and our own masses, and what goes on our celestial bodies onto us, even though we can't really control the trajectory of where the different connections shape our path. But we can change our own mass, or we can control what goes on in our universe to a certain extent, even if we can't control the entire solar system or in the physical sense. Yeah. But it was hard as well, because I too went on the opposite and found my way into that. Like the opposite of connection, would it be like loneliness? Would it be isolation? Would it be freedom? Would it be independence? And then found my way into it in terms of, is it just a path that is linking things together? And those things can be memories, places, people, physical objects, or like just energy forces. And for the heroes, I went to Powerpuff Girls because I felt like they've never disappointed me. And yeah,
Wait, I didn't understand what you said. What are they?
The Powerpuff Girls. They're these cartoons. So these three little. I saw this when I was little. It's a cartoon. Actually, your share about the Avenger reminds me of how much I like if I think about my childhood heroes, I think about like Blossoms, Bubbles, and Buttercup. I still remember the theme song going on in my head. And there were these like perfect little girls, and then actually wrote down that they have the innocence of like being kids, but they were also like so sensible and so powerful, and they had these like superhuman abilities, and they saved the day. And but they still wanted like the professor like tuck them in at night. So that duality and dichotomy of like the child self and the adult, like the powerful self, is, yeah, powerful girlhood. and and then I wrote random things like Nigella Rawson, Trixie Mattel and Katya, random podcasters I like, Sola really like, just people I see on Instagram. And I'm like, wow, that person seems really sure of themselves. Like, okay, but what if they aren't that nice? But like, it's fine. I can still admire that persona and try to embody the version of the episode that I see on TV of their powerful girls. But yeah, I guess that detachment also comes from a place of not wanting to look up at anybody in your immediate actual life space in terms of idealization.
One of the ideas that came up that I remembered is, I can't remember who suggested this, but you have like a board of mentors, or you have like a board of people that you refer to. So like when you're making a decision, you can like call a conference meeting, be like, okay, I hereby convene this meeting of should I go to grad school. In this corner we have, what do you say, Tim Ferriss? What do you say, Jesus? What do you say, Mom? What do you say, power broker B, whoever is in that, like, so you basically can get like a board of advisors that you confer with, or just imagine. Again, we're kind of like taking that imagination a little bit deeper this week, not just imagining the different ways our life could go, but imagining the different kinds of guidance we might be able to get, which also connects us culturally, which makes me think, Louis, like, could you have connection with another human being? One, I feel like I'm jumping ahead, that also like just wants freedom and independence. So like the connection is like, we both are connected by our mutual want of not wanting to be connected. That's possible, right?
Yeah.
And be like, just ground rules. Don't call me for anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would look at this, I did like human connection, like just connection with other humans is one way to take this. But we could go like ecological connection and environmental connection as just like the reality that my heart is beating faster now that this is way late for me to be drinking a coffee, but I did it. And I'm going to be paying the cost for that. Right? Like it's connected. The air that I'm breathing, connected. So, I mean, I was interested, Lee, because I had like the exact opposite experience as you did. I was just like, whoa. And I guess I was placebo affecting, like, oh, I can't wait to write about connection. I've been thinking about it in the background and like giving myself the room. So it was just like outpouring of like, the connection that we don't exist in isolation, and that is incredibly mysterious. So for me, also interestingly, thinking about like, the first Plains Native Americans, they refer to like all my relations. That's how they refer to like their existence. It's for all my relations. And they have a word for that. It gets translated as all my relations. And so we think about, there's that tradition of like thinking about what we do affects 7 generations in the future, because we're connected to the future versions of ourselves. And we're connected to the grandfathers and the grandmothers. And we're connected to the elk and to the beaver and to the gnat and to the mosquito. So I think there is a sense of non-human connection here that's interesting. But I guess I wish I would have rephrased the question now. If I asked for our notes, what connections give you strength? Instead of who are your heroes? That probably would have been better for you. Okay, this is on me. Question. What connections give you strength?
Yeah, like when you talk about the more than human connections, like my mind kind of went there when I was writing about heroes, because but then I kind of immediately bring myself back. Oh, they have to be people or characters, you know? So that did come across as I was writing. So maybe I should have let myself go there when I was journaling.
What about like also like the I Ching?
Yeah, like the archetypes,
Yeah,
the
or
gods, the planets. Yeah.
And just that whole like that activity of being, the activity of, what do you call it when you do you throw coins, or how do you do the I Ching when you do the I Ching?
Oh, yeah, you throw coins.
So that's a connection to a practice, right? That gives you strength. So just a couple of references. This is a previous conversation we had. The I Ching is, are we familiar with the I Ching? Book of Changes. It's one of the oldest books of humanity, if not the oldest book from all of humanity. It's an oracle, and it's a really powerful and fascinating. It's an incredibly fascinating document. I would highly recommend spending time with it. We can, anyway. The other thing that's interesting here is animal totems, in the sense that animal totems are whatever animals you imagine that bring you strength. Any animal that brings you strength when you imagine what it's like to be that animal. My favorite definition of animal totems. You can also think about this as there's evolutionary strategies. Did we talk about animal totems in a previous week? I thought we did. And I made the joke that I'm a hawk rat. I can see things, but also like I'm a scavenger and I like to collect things that I can use later. Like if people are going to throw out food, I'm like, oh, no, I have a Tupperware in my car. It's my rat totem. Don't throw out that food. That's just like, that's money. You're just throwing away money. I'll go get my Tupperware. I even have ice packs because I thought there might be food. Right? So I want to kind of, I guess, point being, and I'm glad we got here, thanks Louis, is that we're really looking for not only what is connection, but what connections bring us strengths. So I'm hoping, I'm going to make that change in my lesson planning for next time. Not just what is connection, but what connections do we have that bring us strengths? It's also the converse. There might be connections that drain us that are not actually healthy. Might be signs that it's like time to actually like put up some walls and be like, you know what? I actually don't want to be connected to this, which is painful, for sure, and difficult, especially if they're like our boss or whatever it is. You were also, Louis, you nailed the fact why I asked about heroes is this framework that we can draw connection from other figures, and that they don't need to be or animals, that we can just, the power of us being like, I want to be more like a hawk, can give us some strength. It's another way we can, the different kinds of writing to establish connection. So we can write communications with other people. We can write a certain way of connecting. We can use our writing as a means of connection that brings us strength. Especially since we have relationships or connections to language and words. And you're like, man, when I write about connection, that's a fucking drag. But when I write about independence and freedom, I'm elated. Well, you're more connected to freedom and independence than you are to connection. Maybe, I don't know.
Mm.
How's that? What is that? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really glad we got here because that was not where I was when I was journaling. And I think partially because of the day I had with some people, like connecting with people at work, to be specific. And I just felt a lot of disconnect today. So I felt like, and I think a lot of this process is kind of shifting me a little bit in what I think connection should be and feel like. And when I don't experience that, I feel even more disconnected.
That makes me think of what a drag it is to be a teacher if you're relying on connections with your students to get you through. I'm like, okay, class, everybody ready to connect? You know what their response is? Either, okay, some people are like, okay, but most people are like, nah, I'll pretend. I don't know, maybe that's just my way of saying, I have found more energy from being connected with who I want to show up as in the classroom, and then you all can do what you want to do. But I'm going to be connecting with myself over here, but I'm going to do it in a way that makes me accessible to you. It's one of the other interesting things. So that kind of like, I'm actually not putting any reliance or pressure on my connections with my students because I've just found them to be unreliable and it's just too much stress to like connect, or my coworkers for that matter. Good God.
Yeah.
No way. No way do I even want that connection. A lot of times. There's a couple that are exceptions that I actually do get and I enjoy talking with, but most people don't.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that this room, I actually genuinely feel connected with the people in this room. And I also don't feel like it's something that I need to like manufacture or maintain. Partially because this is set up in that first week where we're all like, actually, I also want to unleash my hidden potential. And I'm like, fuck yeah, ooh, I should have wrote that one down. Or I want, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a culture and community that we're connected here by. And that's really where this week's work transitions to the next week and to the outside of the class. Ideally, this is another way of using writing to really get clear on like, oh my God, you love Jesus too? Well, let's hang out and talk about Jesus. Oh, wait, what? What do you think Jesus is? Maybe we shouldn't hang out. Or I also really like freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I don't know. I think it's potentially very powerful, which is why we're doing it at this stage of the game. It also builds on synchronicity. Sometimes you're like, whoa, nope. Versus like, whoa, interesting, I'm leaning in. And clearly it connects to like life design, since we're not going to be able to do a lot of our life designs like the grad school question we did. You're looking for that kind of sense where you're like, oh, this is the kind of connection I'm looking for in this program, in this city, in this material with these people. And like Subarna, your freaking metaphor is so gorgeous. If we are our own constellations, whether we like it or not, we're held in place by gravity. That is so rad that like I can modify my celestial makeup of my constellation. I can put stars in different places, but I'm still going to be held by the situation, by the gravity. And it's even more appropriate considering, you know, the designing your life challenges. Don't try to fix gravity problems. Just look at the constellation. You're not going to fix those gravity problems. You can rearrange a constellation to shine a little brighter. If we want to use that celestial body metaphor, which is gorgeous. So this next week, I want us to think about connections that give us strength, not connections that bum us out. And the prompts and the readings are really about thinking about where we can lean into that. I'm imagining too, Monica, if we take this in a creative writing direction, thinking about being connected with our work or with the characters or just with how it comes out. So I just heard, you know, what did Anne Lamott say in that interview? Figure out what your characters really care about and then like take it away from them and see how they react. Ask them, you know, what's going to happen when these two characters get on an elevator together? What are they going to do? They will tell you. Interestingly. Or someone said, what's the every story follows a format. Put your character in a tree and then throw things at them. See how they get down or something like that. I don't know. So I think there's power in this idea of connection and then really actually kind of being careful about what connections are bringing us strength and what connections are not. And some connections that don't bring us strength are still necessary and important. So I don't want to just be like, hey, follow your bliss. This should all be joyous, because that's not really true, I don't think. Joan Ball is great on that. It's like, actually, sometimes you have to do some shit that sucks. So
it feeds into Tim Ferriss's idea about making fear setting. I'm not sure if you read about that. Fear setting, where
yes.
even in the 4-hour work week, and he goes on to feel about, you know, you write about things that scare you the most, like the extreme version and what it would be like, and dwell into that deeper. I think there's a TED talk or something around that as well. Yep. But when you said about what your character cares about and take it away from them in the creative writing exercise, I thought about it even in terms of your own like personal psyche and personal existence exercise about what do I care about in what happens when you take all of that away. And what if I'm on the tree instead? But yeah, it just reminded me of that. And the other thing when you're talking about like protection of energy,
yes,
is very I think it's very intentional. It's not as obvious as it would be nice for it to be. I think it's a very intentional exercise to protect your energy. And the last thing, when I realized when taking the connection away from connections that you use strengths rather than the hero's question, and just the framing of it, I realized how much, and this came up in my morning writing today, about how much like music can affect me in terms of bring change, in terms of mood, in terms of atmosphere, and like so much of just like putting on earphones and just changing the music itself. And that's not a connection that I paid attention too much. And because of that, maybe I lost it at like spurts. There'd be time periods where I'd be really into it, and then I just like not, when things got crazy, and probably when I needed it the most, and it would help the most to have that connection alive, because I didn't see it as a connection. I just saw it as entertainment. But I guess there is value in like setting the strengths and weaknesses of the various connections that just take place in the human experience.
It's like interactive art in general, power of art, not just music. And stories, like honestly, I think I'm just really interested in the story of Jesus, which is why I'm like interested in that as a figure. Not in the Christian sense, but just in like, what the fuck happened there? That is wild. And there's something about that story. So stories, art, versions of us in the past, potential versions of us in the future, people that inspire us, fictional characters that inspire us, animals that inspire us who have evolutionary strategies that are awesome. These are all, I think, areas we can draw strength from, not even to mention the professional connections or the learning connections. That's like, hey, something about you is interesting. I'd like to learn more about you. And I think you might be able to help me decide whether or not I want to go to this grad school. Can I schedule a 15-minute chat to talk with you? Or we haven't looked at letter writing as a powerful therapeutic mode. But like, I'm going to sit down and write you a letter. I've written letters. Some of my most powerful things in my pages were letters to my friends for things that I felt like I needed to tell them, that I ended up not really saying. I actually like wrote the letter and was like, okay, this is what I needed to say. This is what they need to hear. Powerful. So I do think this is another one. Each of these modules is like, it opens up to this entire freaking world if you go there. But I do think, I mean, this one's positioned in a way that I think is hopefully helpful and does build on what we've done before. Does that make sense? I hope that this connection brings you strength this week and that you feel free to reach out or post in the Instagram chat or anything else that's coming up if you want to do the accountability or writing stuff.
Is the daily accountability still happening?
It's not. It crashed and burned thanks to me. My schedule changed too much. And then I'm in like, this week is super crazy. I'm trying to get everything ready for school, which also means trying to wrap up all this wisdom workshop work that I started that I want to finish before the semester starts.
Okay.
But it could. And honestly, we might look at that. I still think having like a free writing in the morning, because you're in Pacific time, right, Lee?
Yeah.
What time would you normally do your morning writing?
Like, if I do it, I ideally would do it around 8:30 Pacific time. Yeah.
Yeah. I might be able to make 9:30 Mountain Time work for me. So we can look at that. Okay. Powerful session. Thanks for being honest, Louis.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Well, I mean, it's really important for me to remember that all these things land way different with everybody, depending on where you are. And that words aren't innocent. And I'm like, ooh, connection. And you're like, ooh, connection. Like, yeah, that's an important difference to note in this process, for me, especially. So I appreciate it. All right. Well, that was a good one. I'm feeling it. Feeling cathartified. I don't think that's a word, but thanks everybody.
I always feel on a high after, like at the end of these classes. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's because of I think it's a community. I just feel like we need this as human beings, and it's so hard to actually get this because most of our interactions have these other expectations on them that, you know, it's really why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you. I'm really glad you're here, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Feel free to reach out. We'll see you next week, if not before then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good luck. Enjoy it.